the House voting to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress over the DOJ's refusing to turn over audio related to President Biden's handling of classified documents, while the Department of Justice, they won't prosecute him. Speaker Mike Johnson, he isn't taking this lying down, though. The House is going to court over this. We're joined now by California Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley, member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. What's your take on what's going on here? And this is going to go to court. Walk our viewers through what the next step is here.
The next step is that Speaker Johnson is going to court to try to enforce the subpoena, which Merrick Garland has been stonewalling for months, saying we're not going to give you these recordings, even though they already acknowledged that we have a legitimate interest in the matter because they produced transcripts of those very recordings. And they've not acted in good faith. In fact, the day we were doing the contempt vote in the Judiciary Committee, just like an hour or two before the hearing, they suddenly assert executive privilege. So I think we have a very strong case for getting access to these recordings. And frankly, I think it is absolutely unacceptable that the administration is not handing them over. I mean, let's remember what the whole origin of this was. That President Biden was being investigated by his own administration for willfully disclosing classified documents. Special Counsel Hur found significant evidence that he did just that he willfully retained these documents. I asked Special Counsel Hur at our hearing, could a reasonable juror have voted to convict President Biden? And he said, yes, he could. And the only reason he didn't bring the case is because of what he found to be diminished faculties of the president during his interviews with President Biden. So it's the recordings of those interviews that we're trying to get access to.
Congressman, what do you think is on those recordings that could be damaging here to the Biden administration? And there was all the talk about President Biden and his mental acuity and with Robert Hur, that interview that lasted 5 hours. But is there more there that you think that they're trying to conceal from voters in this election year?
Well, that's the question. We don't know until we've actually heard them. And we've seen examples now of the White House that actually they do, edit or put things into transcripts or delete things from transcripts that weren't there in the recordings. For example, the president recently was reading from a teleprompter, and the teleprompter said pause, as in telling him to pause. But he reads the word pause, and they then delete that from the transcript. And so that's why we want to have the recordings. Any prosecutor will tell you that an actual recording is the best evidence available as opposed to a transcript of the recording. And we have legitimate interest, that's important to emphasize, in terms of our oversight, in terms of the ongoing impeachment inquiry, in terms of our ability to monitor the work of a special counsel in getting access to these recordings. And it's not the job of the White House to tell us what is and is not relevant to our legislative purposes.
But the Democrats will say that, well, this is going to be weaponized in a year, make Biden look bad in an election year. Is that a valid argument, or should the American public be able to see this and make their own judgment call?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because they do say this. They said this explicitly, the White House, as one of their reasons for withholding the recordings. They said they think it's going to disadvantage the president politically. It's going to be sliced up and replayed. But that's not a reason to refuse to comply with a lawfully issued subpoena. And so I do think that we're talking about something that is very much in the public interest, that we're talking about, number one, the president potentially having committed a felony, and that a reasonable juror could have found he did just that, according to Special Counsel Hur. And number two, whatever Special Counsel Hur observed during those interviews that caused him to conclude the president has diminished faculties. So those are things that certainly the American public has a right to know, but there are also specific legal reasons why we have a right to get access to these recordings in our oversight role in the House.
So you have the Biden administration here. They won't prosecute Merrick Garland, yet they went after Steve Bannon. They went after Peter Navarro. Is this a textbook example of our so-called two-tier justice system that we have?
It is at the very least quite ironic that just days after we got the information related to Bannon that supposedly was a product of him not complying with the subpoena, you have the Department of Justice saying we're not going to follow through with this contempt citation and prosecute the Attorney General, even though he's doing the exact same thing. And so I think it is another example of how under the Justice Department of this administration, this line between law and politics has become increasingly blurred. And I think that's a very, very troubling thing for those of us who care about equal administration of justice and the rule of law in this country.
The lawfare here is incredible. I appreciate you coming on, Congressman Kiley. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your Father's Day. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me.